Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
All life is movement. It is not only physical movement that separates living beings from inert matter. It is also contending ideas and intellectual ferment generating movement that best describes the course of human civilization. Ironically, movement is seldom smooth or unobstructed. Whether it is the flow of a meandering river to meet the sea, or the gusts of wind, they often change course, gather or lose momentum. It is the same with ideas and opinions. Motion in the context of parliamentary democracy has many different meanings. Primarily, it refers to various stages through which a bill introduced to enact a piece of legislation passes through the House. The address of the President that is delivered on the opening day of the budget session is a detailed outline of the government policies and programs. It is a document prepared by the ruling government, and it is common to include a list of achievements that the government puts before the House to highlight its own work. Although it is called the President's Address, it is in fact a speech that cannot deviate from the prepared draft handed over by the government. The head of the state in India symbolizes the sovereignty of the Republic, but has a limited executive role. The office is held in the highest esteem, and propriety demands that there is no interruption during this speech, and it is passed unanimously with a vote of thanks.
तथा उनके विकास के लिए सरकार नया कानून बनाने देश में और देश के बाहर मौजूद काले धन का आकलन करने के लिए कई स्वतंत्र एजेंसियों द्वारा अध्ययन कराया जा रहा है.
It is customary not to move amendments or cut motions for this. However, in recent times, partisan acrimony has led to swerving away from time-honored customs.
संसद के दो पूर्व संसदों के सदस्यों के संदर्भ में जो विषय मैं 11 बजे उठाना चाहता था उसको आप
There are different kinds of motions, having varying degrees of impact on the fortunes of a government. Governments fall and survive, and the House is adjourned or galvanized into action in the course of the tumult of motions, resolutions, and bills. Any bill or resolution moved in the House passes through certain stages. It is useful to review this process briefly before proceeding to consider motions like the censure motion and the no confidence motion.
There are three stages through which a bill goes through. There is the first reading, and after the first reading, generally a bill would be sent to a committee, the relevant committee. And depending upon the committee's qualification, it comes back again to the House, and it's read again, and then of course all kinds of qualifications are moved against the bill, and then these qualifications are incorporated, and it comes for a third reading, and after the third reading, of course, the bill is either passed or rejected, or last minute amendments are made. A bill can be introduced in any one of the house, either in the lower house, that is the Lok Sabha, or the upper house, that is the Rajya Sabha.
Democracy in a sense means the largest good of the largest number of people. The world today recognizes that welfare state is what any civilized society should strive for. Motions in the Parliament, resolution and bills voted must always be directed towards this end. The elected representatives of the people are charged with this duty to march carefully on the path of progress and social justice. The motion that attracts greatest public attention is the no confidence motion. This is because it decides the fate of the ruling government. Millions are affected by the change. Those who were so far sitting in opposition may suddenly find themselves on the treasury benches. Changes affecting the livelihood of countless ordinary people hinge on this vote. Different political parties represent contending ideologies and socio-economic programs. In an era of coalition governments, it is becoming increasingly difficult for the ruling coalition to retain its slender majority. When no one can claim absolute majority, the dissolution of the House and fresh elections are the only alternative.
A no confidence motion is one of the most serious ones with regard to censoring a government. If a no confidence motion is passed in the lower house of the House, be it in the Assembly or in the Lok Sabha, then the government of the day cannot stay in power.
In a parliamentary democracy, the government can remain in office only as long as it enjoys the confidence of the majority in the House of Representatives. The vote of confidence may be sought by government in power to demonstrate its majority or introduced as a no confidence motion by the opposition to oust a government that seems to have lost the majority.
हाँ, हमारे पुराने प्रधानमंत्री नरसिंह राव जी अगर अपने को स्थिर करने के बाद इस दिशा में थोड़ा प्रयत्न करते तो सफल होते.
In recent past, the government at the centre has fallen after suffering defeat by the narrowest margin of a single vote.
Anything which is discussed under a motion, it has to be carried, the motion has to be carried. So there has to be a voting. If it is a voting in which the opposition or the government, whoever loses, they lose. The motion is dropped.
There are other instances where a Prime Minister has resigned rather than facing the ignominy of losing a vote of confidence.
No confidence motion is generally rare, and you might remember that during the entire Nehru period of 17 years, there was only one no confidence motion that came to be introduced, and it was defeated in the House, which became, of course, much more common later on, but it shows the seriousness of the issue.
Nothing can match the excitement in the deliberations of the Parliament than a debate triggered by the no confidence motion.
सरकार पहले बनेगी और उसका कार्यक्रम बाद में बनेगा.
A motion of no confidence, once admitted, has to be taken up within 10 days of the leave being granted. The time of the discussion is usually fixed on the recommendations of the Business Advisory Committee. The survival of the government in power depends on it. It is not necessary that all cuts moved in a money bill express a lack of confidence in the government. Some cuts may be specific to the appropriation of grants put forward in the budgetary demands of a specific ministry, like the railways. The failure to pass a money bill, a budget, is also treated as a no confidence motion as lack of confidence of the House in the government of the day and may force its resignation.
Warehouse receipt will also be relevant well. It will accelerate connectivity in the state.
A record 15 such motions were moved against governments led by Indira Gandhi. There were 3 each against the governments headed by Lal Bahadur Shastri and P.V. Narasimha Rao. Interestingly, one of the motions against Indira Gandhi was brought in March 1967 by Vajpayee. He also moved a no confidence motion against Rao. The procedure followed in the state legislatures mirrors that in the parliament. There too, a government survival hangs in balance on a vote of confidence. The discretionary power of the governor are much wider and allow him at times to play a decisive role during a trial of strength.
Centre wanted me to dismiss a government here in 1991. So I didn't think it was proper. I was called to Delhi and asked by the government. Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister at that time. He asked me to dissolve this government. I told him frankly that there is no reason for dismissing this government.
After the passage of anti-defection law and the Supreme Court's decision in the famous Bomai case, the majority during a vote of confidence has to be proved on the floor of the House, and no governor can defy this ruling.
So far as the constitutional scheme in defection cases is concerned, it is that the Speaker, in the case of the Assembly in Lok Sabha, the Speaker is the only authority to decide questions of defection and disqualification under the interdefection.
The problem has been encountered more often in the state legislature than at the centre. The Indian Constitution gives the governor considerable scope to use his discretion in deciding the majority of ascertaining the confidence of the House. A censure motion against a minister, if passed, erodes the moral authority of the government. Strictly speaking, it may not be the condemnation of the entire government, but it causes serious embarrassment.
A censure motion is a motion of reprimand. Generally, governments of the day do not want to entertain a censure motion because it becomes a statement regarding the credibility of the government of the day. But a censure motion need not necessarily be a non-confidence motion. A censure motion could be a motion which actually results in the exit of a particular minister and need not be a statement on the government itself.
There are other forms of strong criticism of a government that erode the moral authority of the government to rule. A censure motion of a minister is a severe indictment of the government, and according to the well-established principle of joint responsibility in a cabinet form of government, creates problems for the government's survival.
The other motions are resolutions basically. A censure motion, for example, would be a resolution by a house censoring you, namely resolving that this may not expel you, etc., but this is a serious action by you which requires this resolution.
A censure motion, unlike a no-confidence motion, must give a specific reason. There is an interesting case in India's parliamentary history when the first Prime Minister of the country, Pandit Nehru, moved a censure motion against a member of his own party, resulting in his expulsion.
Mudgal was a member of the Congress party. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was president of the Congress and the Prime Minister. But irrespective of the fact that this member was a member of the Congress party and the charge was of his having accepted a couple of thousand rupees from the Bombay Bullion Exchange Association or something for asking questions. The fact that he was from the Congress party did not deter Jawaharlal Nehru, President of the Congress, to move a resolution for his expulsion from the House.
Much water has flown since, and one seldom encounters such high standards in public life. However, the fear of censure motion keeps governments on its toes, and this weapon is rarely used.
If a government does not articulate itself properly or does not respond to the demands or the feelings of the house, the sense of the house. And the sense of the house is the sense of the people. Then either the newspaper will take the issue up, or the judiciary will get into it, or the public, which is not good.
A recent example of a civil society group incurring the wrath of the parliament provoking a censorious admonition relates to the use of intemperate language by the members of Anna Hazare's team. Though the House stopped short of passing a resolution censoring those alleged of denigrating the House and committing its contempt, the displeasure made clear, though a sense of the House resolution adopted unanimously.
A sense of the House generally denotes a broad consensus which need not be stipulated in terms of specific resolutions that is available, wherein both the ruling party as well as the opposition seem to be conveying that a particular motion or particular resolution or a particular bill be passed, and overall across the political parties they would not have major objections with regard to the passing of that particular motion.
मैं 86 हेक्टेयर भूमि में 2010-11 में बढ़ाकर 1.11 करोड़ हेक्टेयर में उत्पादन किया है.
It takes more than 10 days to get answers to a question raised in the parliament, except short notice questions that are subject to the consent of the minister.
Madam, Honorable the Finance Minister has given us a very comprehensive reply to the motion that I had moved in the House.
It is for this reason that for raising urgent matters of public importance, other procedural devices have been crafted.
Disappointment at the fact that he has not taken the House into confidence.
हमारे देश में इस सामाजिक संतुलन को बनाए रखने के लिए
These are the adjournment motions, call attention notices, and short duration motions, and mentioning a matter with the speaker's permission.
बहुत महत्वपूर्ण विषय जी अभी शुरुआत ठीक है और भी लोग बोलने वाले हैं ना इसलिए मेरे अपनी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी में धनगर समाज के लोग हैं जो एससी में आते हैं लेकिन उनको प्रमाण पत्र नहीं दिया जाता.
Originally, the motion calling attention of the House or seeking an adjournment were meant to allow the members of the House to raise matters pertaining to their constituencies or areas of special interest that would have otherwise remained unnoticed. India is a vast country with great geographical and regional diversity as well as cultural pluralism. Unless such specific mechanisms are provided constitutionally and incorporated in parliamentary procedure, the mind-boggling diversity of our Federal Republic, with a population of 1.25 billion, would not be adequately articulating the aspirations of the people or give the representatives an effective voice in governance.
तो इतनी बड़ी घटना घट गई कि अब आपको सारा काम को स्थगित करके और उस पर विचार करवाना है संसद को, क्योंकि सर्वोपरि संसद है. वहीं ये सवाल उठेगा, वही देश के या लोगों के या संसद सदस्यों के क्षेत्र के आशा और आकांक्षा का प्रतीक तो संसद ही आपका है ना. तो इतनी बड़ी घटना घट गई कि काम रोको, बाकी काम रोक करके संसद के जो रूल्स ऑफ बिजनेस में या बिजनेस एडवाइजरी कमेटी ने जो रखा है, इतना इंपॉर्टेंट काम आ गया कि अध्यक्ष महोदय की अनुमति से पहले नोटिस देना पड़ेगा. उसमें भी उन्होंने काम रोको प्रस्ताव रखने का इजाजत दे दिया.
The motions in Indian Parliament that have sought constitutional amendments have often resulted in passage of legislation that became landmarks in the history of our young democracy. Abolition of privy purses and other privileges of princes ended in one swift stroke the vestiges of feudalism, some of which had survived as painful anachronisms even after independence. In territories ruled by erstwhile princes, this brought a dramatic change in the mindset of the people and convinced them about equality before law in Republican India.
There are issues where you have to have 2/3 majority, but there is a third kind of an amendment which largely bears upon federal nature of power, where not merely a bill be passed by a 2/3 majority of the parliament, but also by a majority of state legislatures or state legislatures across India.
Introduction of Panchayati Raj is another example of how a move to amend the constitution can unleash dormant energies of a people accustomed to deprivation and discrimination. The process of decentralization and devolution of political power, that is the essence of this ambitious piece of legislation, has empowered millions to become masters of their own destiny. Now they can make and implement plans at the grassroots level and shape their own destinies. Such motions don't always have an easy passage. To convert them into a concrete resolution, a draft bill that becomes an act and the law of the land requires myriad skills on the part of the members of the House. Long hours of debate and discussion may or may not result in consensus. Often the original resolution moved undergoes substantial changes due to amendments introduced. Basic ideological or other differences can result in a stalemate. The fate of a bill seeking women's reservation in the parliament has been in a limbo for long. The controversial Lokpal bill has waited for even a longer time. It also illustrates an interesting aspect of parliamentary procedure. When one house passes a draft bill and the other house doesn't, the motion falls through. This was the case when the Panchayati Raj amendment couldn't be adopted when originally moved. To break the logjam, a joint session of both houses may be held to reconcile the conflict.
It is not very often that governments like to call a joint session and push it through. It is not customary. I mean, it is only in a absolutely situation where all avenues have been exhausted and nothing else is left. So, in a sense, I personally feel it's a good thing that in these two houses, two different formations enjoy majority. It helps the maturing of democracy, it helps in consensus building, debates are better, and the whole country in a sense has an opportunity to get involved with the process of consensus building in the house.
This couldn't be done in the case of Lokpal due to the constraints of time. The move to legislate a Lokpal law has also brought into sharp focus the role of civil society in lawmaking.
Sovereignty in a democratic country rests in the people. Parliament is really a convenient model for people to exercise, because for lakhs and lakhs of people, you just can't sit down. We can't be like in the old thing. And therefore, even in Britain, for example, where it's a very technical thing saying that Parliament can do anything except make a man into a woman. Now, Dicey, the famous constitutional expert, had said, technically, it may be said that in England, Parliament is supreme. But in fact, this sovereignty is with the people. And in our country, there is no dispute. In a written constitution, sovereignty rests because we the people have given ourselves this constitution.
The role of the Speaker in passing resolutions and motions is pivotal. The Speaker presides over the Lok Sabha, and the words of the Speaker cannot be challenged by anyone. Whether it is a procedural matter or a substantial issue, Speaker's decision is always final. The Chairperson of the Rajya Sabha also enjoys similar unfettered powers. It is the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or the Chairperson in the Rajya Sabha who decides if the bill moved and under discussion is to be referred to a select committee or a joint session of both houses is to be held. Admissions of a motion, the timing of the discussion, and the order of the speakers, particularly in the debate, and above all, the vote that decides the fate of a motion, fall within the exclusive jurisdiction of the presiding officer. We have travelled a long way since the dawn of independence, leaving behind unpleasant memories of servitude and feudal exploitation, deprivation and discrimination. Motions in parliamentary democracy have genuinely empowered the people, particularly the disadvantaged. Discarding the burden of deadwood, they have enabled the citizen to ensure responsible and responsive governance. A bright future beckons the young republic. Challenges may be complex, but opportunities are immense. The journey on the path of progress is unceasing.